As we pray for Pope Francis this week and pray that he rests in God's eternal peace, I recall when he was first chosen to be Pope. One priest came up to me and said, "Oh, certainly he's named after Francis Xavier." But later on, we found out he was named after St. Francis of Assisi. Now, it's interesting that he chose this name because he's a Jesuit. Francis was not a priest. And, it's Francis's name had never been chosen before. But we can see that when he chose that name, he was going to live his life according to St. Francis. In other words, he's going to follow Christ through the inspiration of St. Francis of Assisi. And that's why he showed care for creation. That's why he was an instrument of peace. And that's why he was concerned about the marginalized. The church ought to be a field hospital. In the first reading, we have all kinds of acts of mercy as the disciples are healing people. But one of the things they're trying to dispel is people has all kinds of superstitions, and they thought if you got close enough to someone's shadow who had the gift of healing that you could be healed. But what they're trying to show the people that this is the power of God at work in the people. This is the way Jesus lived out his life, and they're continuing what Jesus did. And there's all kinds of merciful acts happening in our hospitals, when we go to the eye doctor, when we go to the dentist. Well, that's a tough one. And so once again, it's the ministry of Jesus that's continuing. In the gospel reading, the disciples are in fear, understandably so. I wouldn't want to be crucified either. But Jesus comes among them, and he offers them peace. Now, he doesn't say to them, before this, he doesn't say, "Why did you desert me? Why did you abandon me?" No, he offers them peace, showing that he has forgiven them. He has let that go. He understands, and he lets it go. Maybe that's the way we have to approach our different relationships, is always to come forward with peace. And this is a peace, this is a blessing of peace that, may God give you every good thing that you need, in life. And what a gift that would be. Now, Jesus is going to offer peace again because he's going to send them out of this locked room out into the world to continue not only acts of healing, but also for the ministry of forgiveness. How important it is we are forgiving. We have a choice. We can allow resentment to carry us into a dark hole, or we can simply forgive. And we recognize that. Now, Thomas is not present. And it's interesting that we continue to call Thomas doubting Thomas, and yet we don't call Peter denying Peter. We don't call Paul persecuting Paul. We don't call Moses murdering Moses. And yet we still call Thomas the doubter. And yet he gives the great proclamation of faith, "My Lord and my God." He not only believes God raised Jesus from the dead, he also believes that Jesus is God. And so maybe that's what Thomas ought to be known for. And, we all struggle. And so the book of Revelation, which is probably your favorite book, is one about the struggle between good and evil. And that exists within our own hearts as we're trying to do the right thing, and sometimes we fail. And yet what this book is trying to emphasize is that goodness will triumph. God's goodness, God's love will win out in the end. If God can overcome crucifixion through resurrection, then God can overcome anything. And so we still have wars going on in our world. We have politicians that are making life uncomfortable for us, and we still have many acts of sin in our world. But in the end, love will triumph, and we have to hold on to that, and we have to live our lives according to that. If we first and foremost have love, then it's easier for us to believe in a good God. And so as we gather around the table, Lord, we gather to celebrate the gift of Pope Francis's life, but our own lives, and may we receive God's mercy so that we can give mercy to others.